Hey folks, Ryan Rishaug here in the Sherwood Park Got Your Back studios. Got a great podcast coming your way. Just wanted to give you the subtle heads up ahead of time. If you're watching this on video, you're going to notice we had a few technical issues, a catastrophic internet drop here in the Got Your Back studio. So our pal Chris Sabunia is pulling all sorts of levers and pushing buttons behind the scenes to cobble this thing together. So my video might come and go a little bit if you're watching. Otherwise, if you're listening, it'll seem reasonably normal. Well, as normal as we ever seen. Here's the pod. Cheers. It's going to be like 6 minutes of technical mess getting them sorted here, so I hope everybody's feeling patient.
The hair is good. Talking about me behind my back?
Holy
yes.
Jesus.
Wow.
Jesus.
Coming in hot.
Amateur hour.
Oh.
Okay. No, your mic, your very phallic mic is not picking up again.
Yeah, I can hear it through my headphones.
Is that it?
Why are you so loud?
We can hear you. We can hear you.
Turn it down.
So why are you saying it's not working then? Do you need me to, I do sound echoey here, eh? Like hollow?
A little bit, yeah. Is there a setting on there that can be...
Turn on your echo cancellation.
What is that? I don't know what the hell that is.
Hello, folks. Welcome to Got Your Back NHL edition, Friday Roundtable edition. Today on the pod, a star-studded cast, skewing fairly TSN heavy, though I must say. Pierre LeBrun, as always, will join us. Darren Dreger and James Duthie making his Got Your Back LeBrun and Rishaug podcast debut. We're going to talk about all sorts of things. We're going to talk trades. We're going to talk about a frustrated Connor McDavid from last night on a disallowed goal in overtime. A few streaks ended around the National Hockey League as well. And we will chat with James Duthie about his recent trip to the World Cup. Got Your Back, NHL, Friday Roundtable edition, brought to you by Cross Country Canada Supplies and Rentals. And they provide equipment and supplies to all facets of the Canadian construction industry, but what really sets them apart is their get-her-done attitude. It's a core value of their company to have it proudly displayed on the walls at each of their branches. Every one of the staff members lives by the get-her-done formula to ensure they never let the customer down. They'll bend over backwards to get their clientele what they need when they need it. No excuses. Cross Country Canada takes great pride in this attitude. You know what else they take great pride in? A fantastic Christmas party. I experienced it for myself last week. You can tell a lot about a company by the way they let their hair down. And Cross Country Canada Supplies and Rentals does it all the right way. As we say good morning to all of the fellas, basically the insider trading panel from last night. James Duthie making his debut here on the LeBrun Rishaug podcast. Pierre LeBrun in a t-shirt and suit coat in this early morning. And Darren Dreger, what's the t-shirt there, Pierre?
National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. Come on, boys. Come on.
Yeah, that's actually a good shirt. I was going to mock it, but that's a good shirt.
No, that's quality. No.
And the suit coat, I guess, is, I mean, you know.
I don't know.
Is the Cowboys helmet just like literally just sitting on the back of your couch as a prop?
Oh, wow. I didn't even notice that. Holy cow. That's unreal. Huh.
It's better than the toque you wore like last week or the week before. It was outrageous.
Well, I finally got a haircut because Dregs was angry with my mullet, so I got a haircut.
And you got a tight haircut too, man. I was staring at your side of your scalp the entire time down in Florida. You can see, like,
that's funny. All the viewers at home were staring at you in your pocket because you kept taking the hand out of your pocket. Your pocket was making weird shapes, and it was just, I think it was uncomfortable for everybody watching at home.
There's a lot going on in those pockets, apparently.
I'll send a screenshot to Zuby of the, haven't talked to you in a long time, James. I think, and I consider you a bit of a mentor. So when you give me feedback, it means a lot to me. It's been a long time since I heard from you. And I saw that you sent me a text. I thought, there's finally some feedback coming from James. And you sent me a video of myself chirping me for using my, what do you do with your hand when you're?
I know it's difficult. I mean, we usually sit on stools because I think that looks more professional. And I insist on it even on the road that the camera operator go out and buy stools for me. And then what I will do is I'll put my phone or my papers in front of my crotch so I don't have an embarrassing elephant toe kind of situation. And but it is more challenging, I admit, standing up. I had to do a couple of those at World Cup. The extra hand when you're standing is difficult because you don't want to just leave it dangling awkwardly by your side. So the pocket look is not bad. I was just commenting that you were going in and out of the pocket probably about a dozen times during the hit. And every time you did that, like your pants kind of got mangled and it just looked embarrassing.
Interesting.
Like, honestly.
By the way, little pro tip for you, James.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta hold the mic with your outside hand. So then your inside hand is the one going in and out of the pocket. Just little hosting tip for you there if you want. Right. So if you're standing on the outside, then it's your outside arm holding the microphone and then the inside.
That's not what you were doing, though. You were doing the exact opposite of that.
Well, that's what I did the next day because of your feedback. I switched it up and did that the next day. So I'm trying to help you be.
Okay, well done.
Okay, we're going to get to your World Cup experience, all that stuff. You're going to stick around afterwards for our interview segment, by the way. And that's not a paid segment. This segment is paid. The next one isn't because you're a guest. But we're going to get to some happenings from around the National Hockey League. And so we're going to get to the breakdown brought to you by Pro Hockey Life. Christmas is on the way. Pro Hockey Life can be a one-stop shop for the hockey lover in your life. Some cool products to think about. They've got that Hockey Shot Hockey Radar. Track how hard you or your young player are shooting it. You can see and measure improvement as it's happening, or cool training devices like the Super Deke or the Helio Core Performance Sensor. They got all the great technology to help measure and improve your growth in different areas. Lots of great apparel as well. Check out Pro Hockey Life to take care of the hockey lover on your Christmas shopping list. You guys hear Connor McDavid last night post-game? I was standing there front and center. I think it's notable when, the McDavid doesn't often do this.
I was standing there front and center.
That was kind of LeBrun-like.
That was a little bit LeBrun.
I had my right hand in my right pocket and my left hand on my
I'm
microphone.
just sitting here quiet, and I just get hammered on the way with that. Like, it just Rishaug, a little LeBrun in there. Jeez.
I know. Welcome to the Roundtable. So, listen, they have a goal called back in overtime because of an offside. It was the Situation Room in at the Nerve Center who flagged it, and they end up calling it back. So McDavid didn't love it. And actually, I got the sound here. I'll let you guys listen to what he said post-game. And remember, Connor McDavid doesn't do this a lot.
Shouldn't be in that position.
Never mind, that's Darnell Nurse. I think I deleted the McDavid clip accidentally.
Well, then.
Yeah, paraphrase. The league's got to get itself together. Players have to understand what the situation is. I thought I was in possession of the puck. Ever since I was a little kid, I thought if you were in possession of the puck when you crossed the line, you were fine. So league's got to do a better job explaining to players what this means, basically, right?
Okay, James, thank you for that. Nice cover for me. What did you make of it, Dregs, when McDavid says something like that? Because it's not something he does a lot of.
No, it's not. As I watched it, the first thing that came to mind last night was, when does McDavid not have possession of the puck? Like, when the puck is in his general vicinity within a few feet, I think you can make a case that he's got possession of it. But the one thing I will, and I'm flip-flopping here, I know the process of the Situation Room in Toronto and how painstakingly they go through it, literally inch by inch. And there's a big difference. I saw social media blow up. Well, what about Cale Makar last year? Well, it was different because it was a tag-up possession. So this wasn't that. I don't know how ultimately you make that call. If I'm in that Situation Room, I'm giving the benefit of the doubt to McDavid. But it was clearly game-changing one way or the other. Edmonton still had opportunity to win. They weren't able to win, but that's a tough one for me. I understand his frustration.
I feel like the real headline here is that the Oilers gave up a shorthanded goal for the Blues to tie it in the last minute. Is that not probably the bigger issue in all this?
It is. I would say, though, isn't there something, and you guys probably have the rule book memorized more than me, it's not just possession, which possession is defined as sort of the last guy to touch the puck or whatever. Control is the actual word that you have to have control as well, which means the puck is right on your stick. But I think you're right, Dregs, in the sense that this is kind of like goalie interference. where none of us really 100% understand
No
what
clue.
the rule is. And when the best player in the game doesn't quite understand it either, then that's a problem. So I would say whether they, I'm sure that the NHL would come on and by their definition, they probably got the call right. But I think the bigger problem is explaining it to all of us and explaining it more importantly to the best player in the game and everybody else is to, whether it makes sense or not. And I think this goes, I'm sure you get heat dregs still whenever this comes up, whenever there's an offside, people go back to us, 10 years ago, people insist we lobbied for this change to get coaches' appeals and such. And there is probably essences of truth to that, but I don't think we ever wanted every single thing to be appealed. This all came after that Duchesne thing when he was 20 feet offside. Yeah. And I think the context, what everybody wanted was to avoid the obvious mistake. And we've gone from avoiding the obvious mistake to doing all these little tiny definitions of the rules and skate off the ice and so on and so forth, which I don't think anybody likes. How to solve that, I'm not 100% sure, but I think we'd all agree that that's problematic.
Mm-hmm.
Dregs, is there like McDavid talked about a lack of clarity and players needing to, is this a common theme? Like, do you hear this from players? I don't know, Pierre, if you do you think a lot of guys feel like we just need clarity, or is it in the moment guys are just frustrated and so obviously they go at it a little bit?
I mean, it's in the moment for me, but Connor didn't just stop at the possession issue, which determined the decision last night. He lumped in goalie interference, as James has alluded to, and that's the one that seems to be most confusing. But the dynamic of how that play is ruled on obviously is different with every single situation. So, look, it feels like it's going to be an age-old debate, offside especially. We saw a tight offside called last night in the Toronto-New York game, and we commented off camera that it was surprising that the linesman actually blew the whistle, that he called it, because normally they don't when it's that close. So there'll be ongoing debate as to whether there's a time limit and when the goal gets scored and all this. But I will assure you of one thing. In the moment Connor's frustrated, I guarantee you Stephen Walkham, the head of officiating, or Colin Campbell or Mike Murphy inside the Situation Room has probably extended the invitation through Ken Holland to Connor McDavid. If you want to have a video session or a conversation about why that specifically was called the way it was, or goalie interference, or anything else in the rule book that confuses you, we'll give you as much time as you need.
Well, and obviously officially, there's always an avenue through the competition committee where the PA and the league sit together once or twice a year and beat up these subjects for the players to have a voice. But, I go back to a number of GM meetings ago. Or I don't know when did the Coaches Challenge come in, but before it did, there was one guy in the room that did not want this. And the managers kept pushing. We kept pushing in the media. James Duthie kept pushing on the panel. The person that was stubborn until the very end and had to be convinced at the very end about the necessity for this video review was Gary Bettman. And I'll never forget it. Dregs was there. And he would come out and say, I'm just telling you guys that, be careful what you wish for. I'll never forget it. And I'm like, come on, get with the times. Everyone else has video review in every other league. And I think this is what he was probably thinking is that, I think it stinks having to review all these offsides for a play that's inches away. It reminds me, I'm a huge football fan, as you guys know. And every time there's a touchdown now, I kind of hold for a second before I react. I want to make sure there isn't a flag or there isn't a video review. And I think that it's just, I don't think it's done really what it should have done here with in terms of the offside review. I would actually like to completely eliminate it, but I don't think you're putting the genie back in the bottle at this point.
By the way, that might have been the first ever compliment here on Got Your Back, Dregs. I think he complimented you somewhere in there, so we'll have to clip that and mark it there. That was actually said something nice. Okay, we'll move on from the rule. Let's just talk McDavid here for a moment, James. The way that he's playing the game, the goals that he's scoring here, our narrative this year is all the goals that Connor McDavid's piling in, and Austin Matthews, from a goal scoring standpoint, is off the pace that he normally does. Pretty interesting to see McDavid with this kind of sniper's instinct he's playing the game with this year, and the way that he's scoring these goals, the way that he's shooting the puck. Just look at that goal that he scored last night, shooting through a defender again. But it's kind of flipped here. McDavid showing the world he is absolutely a premier goal scorer.
I think it's remarkable that you can have an off season where people kind of say, hey, the one thing you haven't done is score 50 and win the Rocket Richard. And he can just kind of go, okay, I'll do that this year, which is incredible. And, I still think that we're all taking him for granted to an extent, which sounds crazy because, he'll lead the highlights on SportsCenter. But I'll take you back to the I guess it's called the Northern Star Award now, the former Lou Marsh Trophy that was renamed this year. And I'm on that voting committee, and he got very little mention. I'll give Arash Madani a credit from Sportsnet who brought him up. Like, everyone was talking about Marie-Philippe Poulin ends up winning the award. And I think Cale Makar was maybe a runner-up in there. Brooke Henderson was in the discussion somewhere. And I just like, guys, at some point, Connor McDavid has to win this award. The fact that, and you can say, okay, well, he didn't win the Stanley Cup and Makar won the Conn Smythe, and this is where the arguments were going. And I said, this is all fine. And, it's a worthy argument, Makar versus McDavid last year, and Marie-Philippe Poulin for everything she's done in hockey is certainly a worthy winner. But I said, we're at like years. You can't just say every year, McDavid will win this eventually. It's been going on 7 years now. He's been the best player in the league and the best player in the world. And at some point he has to win this award. And I was kind of baffled by the lack of support he was getting everywhere. And I think it's not a shot at him. It's just the mere fact that the expectations are so high for them. I'm like, what is it going to take for him to win? Is he going to have to win the Rocket, the Hart, and the Stanley Cup and the Conn Smythe for him to win the Canadian Athlete of the Year? So, yeah, that's a long-winded way, Rish, of saying the guy can do anything he wants, and I think what he's doing right now is just spectacular.
It's Shoggy Dog. Dregs, what do you make of it?
Shoggy Doggy.
Sorry, I wasn't paying attention. What did he say?
It's actually quite deep, from Jimmy
like the
there.
panel.
Didn't you miss this podcast, James?
No, how do you take issue or argue with James' position on that? I'm surprised at the fact that he hasn't won that, but it does feel like McDavid and the Oilers are in a win now mode. So maybe that changes in the near future. I know from an organization perspective, they look at the next 3 years as being incredibly valued in Edmonton and with their push to win. So perhaps that looks after itself. But I just, everybody on that panel should be ashamed of themselves for not including. I think that was the point you were making, James.
Well, I think
other than yourself and Arash Madani, right?
Well, first of all, you could probably make the argument that Marie-Philippe Poulin should have won every year for a long time now, the way she's dominated women's hockey. But I think to your point, James, and I spent 13 years at the Canadian Press, where we have the CP Male Athlete of the Year, CP Female Athlete of the Year, voted on by sports editors back in the day, and they still have those awards, of course. But it always felt to me that those awards were about, okay, which non-NHL player can we highlight? Mike Weir, Jacques Villeneuve, Larry Walker, and again, all deserved winners. But I always felt like we know we're good with our Canadian players in the NHL, but what else in the world are we good at? And it always feels like, generally speaking, that's what these awards end up being about.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're right, and there's, and I don't want this whole thing to get sidetracked into a discussion of the Athlete of the Year award, but I'm sorry, but the Olympics happens twice, every 50% of the years there's an Olympics, and an Olympian win 2 or 3 gold medals, and again, all these people are worthy. But at some point, I think you can't ignore the guy who's staring right at your face, and if he keeps up what he's doing now, he better win next year, because unless somebody does something ridiculously spectacular. So
I was a dummy at the start of the year saying I didn't necessarily agree with the idea this was going to be the year McDavid got 50. Needs 23 in 51 games from here on out to hit that mark. Feels like it's a virtual lock. He's shooting at 22% this year, by the way. His career is 15. But he's shooting that thing with authority, and it's been pretty impressive to watch. Alexander Ovechkin had a shot at the record. There he is, standing in his wheelhouse, the one-timer ready to go. And Dregs, he passes off. Like, he passed the puck off. I think that surprised everybody.
Yeah, a little bit. Team first, right? For Ovie, we've seen that time and time again. No, you're right. I mean, when he's in that wheelhouse position of the one-timer, I mean, he must have not seen the seam that he normally sees. I mean, how many times historically have we seen this guy powder the puck and put it in a spot that's a puck width wide? Like that's what seems to be most shocking about his goal scoring success is that goalies know where that shot is coming from. They see it, 800 times, and yet he still finds an opening. But I don't know, we talked a little bit about this in our pregame show last night, and I know Pierre has strong feelings on it as well. I poked around a little bit because it feels like the celebration or the watch of Ovechkin and his quest to beat Gordy, move into second all time, and ultimately catch Wayne is muted a little bit, or at least downplayed. And it feels that way in Canada. I know that there's certain pockets of Canada where with 100% there would be geopolitics that sway that. So I just kind of flipped a couple of people I trust in the U.S. a text. What do you think? Is it being downplayed, dampened a little bit because of what's going on with Russia and the Ukraine? And I got the exact opposite response. Exact opposite. I was reminded that ESPN Sports Center has it, in their coverage on a nightly basis. I get sent the data from the tweets involving Ovechkin every time he scores and whatnot. So maybe it's just this pocket, our pocket across parts of the world that feels it, but I definitely sense it, although I still celebrate that this man is not only approaching, but likely going to make history.
Yeah.
You just have to. Sorry, go ahead, Pierre.
I was just going to say, I pronounce myself on this so often now but it's still uncomfortable for me. Not the hockey part, and my dealings, our dealings with Alex Ovechkin have always been tremendous. I know his teammates love him. What he's doing I never thought Wayne Gretzky's goals record could even be challenged. By the way, it's mind blowing what he's doing. But I can't hide how I feel about this, and this is a guy that's aligned himself with Vladimir Putin in the past. Now I get it, as a lot of people have reached out to me to give the other side that if he came out and distanced himself from Putin now, he's got family and friends living in Russia, that there's real life concerns there. I totally get that. I'm not naive. It's just I think it's okay for someone to say amazing record that he's chasing, amazing accomplishment. I mean, truly amazing, but I'm still uncomfortable with it for those reasons. And I'm not going to back down from that.
Yeah, I've heard polar opposites, and I think they're all valid. And I think you have to respect everyone's opinion on this. If there is someone who thinks that he should not be celebrated whatsoever because of this, then I think I respect that. And I've had Ukrainian Canadians talk to me and say that exact same thing. I've had others say, I can completely separate politics and war from sports, and I'm going to celebrate Ovie the exact way I've celebrated him his entire career. And I respect that opinion as well. As guys working for a sports network, obviously we have to cover it. I thought this is probably, I think you argue, the biggest record in hockey, right? The all-time goals
For
record
sure.
that he's chasing.
For sure.
But I feel the same way as Pierre, where there's discomfort in every conversation. But I think as long as you note it in your discussions as you cover it, then you go forward.
Definitely sense conflict, like talking to different reporters who have proximity to it. And there's conflict there, right? Because from a hockey standpoint, James, you point out it's just such a massive record, and in any other circumstance, it would be celebrated huge. But it's a tough one, and there's conflict within the reporters who are tasked with covering this for sure. And I agree with you, Dregs. I think it's muted. I think it's a little more toned down than it normally would be under different circumstances. All right, let's get into some trade talk. You guys did insider trading last night. I don't know. I feel redundant here in this segment now, James. Do you just want to talk to the fellas about some potential trade stuff? Pierre, you dropped an article in The Athletic this morning. You want to give us an idea what your headline was?
Yes, where I cited Darren Dreger. I cited Darren Dreger of TSN in my rumblings. Well, it's funny because both Dregs and I stumbled upon some similar information yesterday, which just goes to tell you that the
who had it first, Dregs? You were Pierre.
Yeah, Dregs had it first.
There may have been a nap involved in Pierre's house that kind of pushed him back a little bit.
But I think what it tells you is the Canucks are obviously communicating some I won't say demands, but communicating what they might be looking for in a Horvat trade to several teams, and now word is starting to spread out. And I actually didn't talk to Dregs about this off air, but I was a bit surprised by what I was hearing. And just to recap, Dregs report, and I wrote today that Canucks are looking for a young center and/or a young right shot D as part of more of a hockey deal for Bo Horvat as opposed to a futures deal, which normally you would see for a rental player, right? Whether or not they can pull that off, we'll see. But it was interesting to me because we don't see a lot of hockey deals involving pending UFAs in season, right? Usually those trades are in June. So I thought that was pretty interesting news.
I'm completely distracted by the dogs fornicating behind James. I'm sorry. I don't know what's going on there.
The dog's not fornicating. The dog just pooped on the chair.
No, it didn't.
Come on.
Let's see.
You can zoom in there.
Oh my goodness.
Zoom in like right around.
What kind of a absolute?
Yeah, I have a disabled dog. Okay, she can't use her back legs, so she has some issues, and she just when things happen. So you guys are going to continue to discuss. I'm just going to clean up this little mess, and I'll be right back with the discussion. I'm leaving just for like 90 seconds. I can't continue this conversation with poop behind me.
You're not getting paid for this 3-4 minutes here.
Oh boy!
You know, I've always said James Duthie's a man of many talents. It's all I'm gonna say.
He needs a reality show.
You can still see it in the camera shot too. You can see it in the chair there. That's just. Okay, we were talking about Horvat there. I lost my train of thought. It was the dog snoring in the background too.
Yeah, I was a bit of a shitty segue there.
Hey! I've got a beep. If anybody wants to swear, I got a beep soundtrack here. Dregs, where are you at on Horvat? I know I heard the information you were talking about last night, but I don't know. I think people would be surprised to hear some of what you guys reported, like maybe not what they were expecting as far as futures.
Yeah. Well, look, I think the other thing that needs to be noted is the timeline of this, right? And Pierre's right. I mean, the information that we collected yesterday does cite that, look, we know they need to clear cap space for next year, but they're looking for a young NHL center and a young NHL right shot defenseman. You know, if they could get that for Bo Horvat, man, they'd be over the moon. But they do have Brock Besser. They have some other pieces that they're willing to move. What I didn't mention yesterday, which I think is a bit interesting, so the salary cap relief could come in the form of moving out Brock Besser. But again, like Pierre established with Horvat, you know, they're looking for hockey deals here. And it's also the reason why I don't believe that Bruce Boudreau is going to make the season as coach. I mean, we've fired this guy a dozen different ways to this point of the season. But if they can make those hockey deals, they feel like they can transition pretty quickly in Vancouver, but also take advantage of a really strong 2023 draft. So maybe there's, you know, the timeline is this. Somebody comes to them with the right deal for Horvat, they make the deal. They don't wait for the trade deadline. If somebody comes to them with an NHL player that makes less money, a little bit less money than Brock Besser, well, then they consider making that deal as well. So it's going to be interesting, but it appears, with all due respect to Vancouver, to Montreal, that Vancouver is going to be the most active among the Canadian teams in the league.
James, as the host of Trade Center, you always hope that these things wait till the last minute. What names are you most intrigued by heading into this year that you're praying you're still talking about the morning of?
I just wanted to add a sponsor for this segment. I'm James Duthie for Simple Solution Stain and Odor Remover. When your dog takes a dump in the middle of a podcast, I turn to Simple Solution Stain and Odor Remover.
Oh my God!
This segment brought to you, in fact, by Pro Hockey Life. But thanks, James. Go ahead. For now, it is.
Sorry, I missed the last 3 minutes of that conversation. But Horvat would certainly be at the top of the list, as well as the two Blackhawks. And I don't know if you've gotten into that. I think it's fascinating. I'm usually one of these guys who, because it's so rare, loves guys playing their entire career with one team. You know, in the case of Sidney Crosby, which it looks like he'll retire as a Penguin, I just think that's perfect. I could never see him anywhere else. But in selfishly, I think when it comes to Kane and Taves, I would like to see them both move on. And I think that maybe the difference there is that Pittsburgh's never had like a 2 or 3 year lull of a rebuild. They're always kind of around as, either a contender or an outside contender or a playoff team, where Chicago's in such a pure rebuild that I think it would be a shame for Taves and Kane to just quietly, go into retirement in the middle of a rebuild. So I would love to see both of those guys go somewhere. I think Taves in Winnipeg would be so intriguing, back to his hometown. Kane pretty much anywhere would be intriguing. So I think those two guys, if it were to happen, and obviously these guys know much more than me about the possibilities of that, I think along with Horvat right at the top of the list.
Pierre, I noticed the Athletics top 25 trade potentials. I think you were part of that article, right? You chipped in on that one a little bit. So the top 25, I noticed that there was no Erik Karlsson on this list anywhere.
That wasn't ultimately my call.
Kind of start a fight here between you and Dregs, but
no, I don't really decide who's on the list or not. I get assigned some players to do some research on it, and so I had 6 or 7 guys on that list. But I certainly would have. I think Karlsson should have been on the list, but not too high
100%.
because it's going to be a difficult trade to make. We had this discussion the other night at dinner, Dregs. I can't remember where we all ended up, but I thought my vote was I thought it would wait till the offseason for Karlsson just because of the contract. But there were a couple of votes at the table that had him going before March 3rd. But it'll take a lot of creativity on the part of 2 or 3 teams, perhaps, in terms of getting a Karlsson deal done. But it's certainly possible.
Yeah. I just don't know how he can't be on every list, right? I mean, General Manager Mike Greer has established publicly that he's willing to listen to interest in Erik Karlsson. He's had conversations about trading Karlsson with Erik and his family, and Erik has acknowledged publicly that he wants to go somewhere where he can win. But because of the complications of the deal, I'm sort of leaning with Pierre in that it feels more like an off-season trade, but isn't that what the building of the day and trade deadline is arguably the second or the biggest day of the year with free agent frenzy? So why wouldn't you want a superstar defenseman who we know is ultimately going to be traded to be part of that process? Makes sense to me.
Yeah. Well, that one feels like, I don't know, if that one's still hanging out there on deadline day, then it'll give you something to talk about all day long. Dregs, if it ends up not happening, well,
that's the last time that Karlsson dominated a trade deadline day and then never got traded, right, in the summer. But we probably talked about him for 7 of the 10 hours.
Yeah.
Okay, you know what? Let's wrap it up there, guys, because we've done lots and it's gotten a little bit messy. Maybe a real quick game before we go, Dregs. What do you think?
Well, like win, lose, or tie? Are we going back to the early TSN days? What are we doing here?
This is the new one I've envisioned. You're going to love it. It's called Love It, Hate It, or Don't Give a Beep. I'm just going to throw some stuff out there. You guys tell me if you love it, you hate it, or if you don't give a beep. How are we going to determine order here? Let's just go James, Dregs, and Pierre. Let's just do that because...
Okay, perfect.
Or maybe the other way. James tends to need some time to think about things a bit. Not quite as quick off the draw. Actually, yeah, let's go Dregs, James, Pierre is the order we're going to go in. All right, love it or love it, hate it, don't give a beep. The zipper merge. The lane is coming to an end. Everybody knows it. Common society, you just zipper merge, one from one lane, one from the other. It really pisses some people off. Love or hate the zipper merge, Dregs?
Don't give a shit. Don't care.
Okay, like you can just say don't give a, and then I'll do the beep. You can't. It's a rated G pod. I mean, we're trying to keep it rated G.
I felt like there was some post-production required here.
Oh, well, you're just creating work.
No, I don't. Okay. Yeah, I don't really care. I feel like we're all adults and we can work through those issues.
Stupid question.
Okay, Pierre.
What's the question? Love it or list it?
Moving on, that feeling you get upgraded to first class, that feeling you get when you're sitting in the chair and the rest of the plane is loading past you. How does it make you feel? Love it, hate it, or don't give a... Dregs?
Love it. Absolutely love it, especially when I have colleagues like you, Ryan, who don't have the same luxuries. Weren't as shrewd in your negotiations as Mr. Duthie and I were back in the day. So 100% love it.
Love it, particularly on a 14-hour flight to Qatar when when guys like my producer Puffy are headed the other direction, if you know what I'm saying.
Oh man, that's a long flight. I can't say I love it because I wish everyone on the plane could be at the front.
Oh,
but I noticed the other day that when Ryan got upgraded on our flight back from the Board of Governors, he had a big smile on his face. He was very happy, man. Yeah.
He did a TikTok about it. That's a full red flag or green flag or blue flag.
I've actually got that in a question coming up. You can vent about that in a second. Okay, sunglasses inside. Early morning, guy shows up, sunglasses inside, and sticks with him for a good hour or two. Darren Dreger.
Hate it. Yeah, it's amateur hour. Especially when they're like, I don't know, gas station sunglasses. Like, I mean, come on, dig out the Ray-Bans or, come up with something that is at least stylish. They were kind of green, and I guess if you're watching this podcast, you know who we're talking about.
Yeah, James, you weren't there. Pierre stuck with sunglasses for an hour and a half inside the hotel on Tuesday morning.
Yeah, I can't, Owen, our fine cameraman, in Qatar, it's so bright that he wanted me to do shades outside because we literally couldn't. It was one of those ones where you had to basically shut your eyes to do a hit. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do the shades on for the hit outside. So let alone this clown doing it inside.
Well, look, he had a real issue, though. I mean, it's not often that a 50-year-old man gets pink eye, but I mean, it does happen on occasion.
Are those the glasses, Pierre? By the way, we're available on YouTube. Pierre has put on the glasses in question.
Yeah.
No, different glasses. I like to have glasses in every room. I have no comment. I did not have pink eye, but I may have had dry eyes. It was very dry in Palm Beach.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay,
right.
People who try to be smart or funny on TikTok, Dregs.
Well, those who are successful.
Yeah, exactly.
I wouldn't say love it. I like it. But those who try, if try is the operative word, and are less successful, hate it. It's embarrassing.
I'm going to go ditto on Drake's there. It's a difficult question because, I mean, are you referring to like the numerous funny people on TikTok or yourself?
Yeah.
Wow. I'm trying not to take myself so seriously. So you step out there and try the odd thing, and then you walk straight into a fist in the nose from Darren Dreger that just makes me want to delete the app, which I might do.
You take it into weird places, though. It's like you're trying to be deep and maybe serious. So you got to work on being more obvious with your humor. No,
Pierre, where are you at on TikTok, buddy?
I think it works for some people. I would not be one of them, but the people that get a following off it, I think it's a wonderful medium, and I'll tell you why. It's so much more lighthearted, and it actually goes back to the original essence of social media, I think, which is bring a smile on someone's face.
You know what? You want a successful TikTok account, follow Gino Reda, because I'll tell you, when he reads the rundown to insider trading Tuesdays and Thursdays on TikTok, I can't get enough of that. Love it.
Wow.
You want to hear a TikTok story? I posted a video. We flew my daughter's boyfriend down to Turks to surprise her in the summer. And I don't know why I posted. I kind of just posted it for my family to see. And for whatever reason, it went crazy and got like 5 million views.
Wow.
And first of all TikTok's a weird place because everybody thinks it was faked. So that I somehow faked a video. I would fake a video of my daughter's boyfriend coming down. But now I get all these companies reaching out to me, and maybe Rishaug knows because he's kind of a social media expert, wanting to buy like the video or the rights to the video.
Oh,
I get emails every day, like from these companies like Reader's Digest, but I don't know what they're going to do with it, and I'm kind of worried. It's my daughter in a bikini. What do they want? What are they going to do?
Yeah, that's
with this
weird.
video?
Yeah.
Anyway,
that's a hard no.
That's the one time one of my TikTok videos went viral by mistake. Is Ryan gone from the show? Is it just the three of us now?
Nah, I think he's disappeared.
James, you don't mind hosting to close out the podcast, do you?
Well,
friggin' amateur hour.
Professional level to the show. Okay, thanks for everybody joining us here on what is this? What is it? The Shoogie Doogie? The Shoogie Doogie
Got
podcast.
your back, LeBrun and Rishaug. Come on.
The Shoogie Doogie podcast brought to you by our friends at Pro Hockey Life and Simple Solution Stain and Odor Remover. Well, in typical backup host fashion, Rishaug has had something go horribly wrong and is unable to finish the segment. So we've got the professional here to say thanks for watching. What was the segment called, Dregs? What's the segment called? The Roundtable. Roundtable. There's it's a pretty original name. The Roundtable discussion. Dregs, have a great day. Thanks for joining us here on my Got Your Ass podcast, and we'll see you next week. Pierre, you stick around because you have a great guest coming up.
Ooh.
We want to tell you about a truly Canadian company. Cross Country Canada Supplies and Rentals provides equipment and supplies to all facets of the Canadian construction industry. But what sets them apart is their get-her-done attitude. It's a core value of their company. I've been to the offices. I've seen how they proudly display that on the wall at each branch. Every one of the staff members lives by the get-her-done formula to ensure they'll never let their customers down. They'll bend over backwards to get their clientele what they need when they need it. They don't make excuses. Cross Country Canada takes great pride in this attitude, and they truly believe that the success of their customer is their success. You can't get much more Canadian than that.
Welcome back to James Duthie's Got Your Back podcast. Once again, technical difficulties today by the amateur host, Ryan Rishaug, who's not only lost the internet in his house, but also all his phone service, apparently. But he's rejoined us now. So welcome to the program, Ryan. Glad to have you.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Long time listener of the program. I'm a big fan of your work. Did you just take right over for me? Like, did you just slide into the role naturally,
Yes.
or what happened?
Pierre tried to, being that he is the actual co-host of this podcast, but I said, Pierre, this is my only skill in life. Let me ride with this.
May have been the greatest moment, greatest sense of relief I've had all year when you took over there, Jimmy. I literally would have stumbled there. Probably just would have gone right back to your dog having a crap during our podcast, something like that. But thank you for taking over.
It was a bit of an inadvertent audition for you, James. Like, I might be growing weary of this podcast and might be in the market for a new host. So maybe I'll take a look back at the tape, and if I like what I see, we'll consider you.
Well, what's interesting about this pod is you had my dog taking a crap live on the pod, and then you metaphorically taking a crap on the pod with your technical performance.
Yeah, no, we're blaming this one on Zuby behind the scenes because he can't defend himself right now. Okay, listen, we're gonna talk a little bit about your World Cup experience. We do have a final segment here if we can get through it in one piece. Time for Who's Got Your Back, brought to you by Liberty Smart Security. It's a company that specializes in having your back, like James just had mine. High quality advanced smart security systems for your home or your business. Liberty Smart Security uses leading edge technology to protect the things that you value most in life. Visit libertysecurity.ca. So James, in the grand scheme of events that you have covered in your professional life, overall experience, magnitude of the event, where are you positioning what you just went and did at the World Cup?
That might take me a couple of years to answer properly, which might sound like a lame answer, but sometimes I need a little time for perspective on these things. I think as far as magnitude of the event, it's the biggest sporting event in the world. But I would say when the Olympics were in Vancouver in 2010, you and I hung out there. To me, the importance of that event to our country, put it on a little bit higher pedestal. Plus the way those Olympics unfolded with the way Canada performed and the Crosby goal and everything else. I've often said to people, I don't think anything will ever top that as far as an event I've covered. But this was certainly at the top of my bucket list as far as something I'd never done. I hosted the Women's World Cup in 2015. I'd hosted a number of MLS Cups, but I had not hosted a World Cup. And so to be there and for Canada to be in it for the first time in 36 years, it felt very cool. The moment in that building, I would say, for the Belgium game when the Canadians were busting out the national anthem and it felt like this team was really front and center on the world stage, that was a really, really cool moment. So I don't know, top 3, top 5 moments or things I've covered in my career, I would say, Ryan.
Well, it's funny, James, that you
Pierre.
mentioned. Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned the anthem before the Belgian game, because all these time zones away, I found myself teary-eyed, not expecting that to happen. It was spur of the moment, but hearing them sing the anthem and all the Canadian fans who obviously made the trip to Qatar, and wow, I was like, whoa, there's a
Yeah.
moment. It was pretty amazing. I think a lot of Canadians on social media were sharing that same sentiment.
You know what's
36
funny
years.
is, yeah, I was taping it, right? You know, we always use our phones now, which I try not to do. I try to soak up the moment most of the time, but I pulled out my phone just to tape during the anthem, and when I played it back, I didn't even realize I was singing, and I was belting it out at the top of my lungs, which an embarrassingly off key chord. But I didn't realize I was doing it, right? So you get caught up in that, and yeah, that and probably the Davies goal, I would say, were the two things you'll never forget. But yeah, it was really neat, and to see the thing about it's different than an Olympics. Like an Olympics is an amazing atmosphere, and it feels like a world event. But I don't think you get that many people coming from other countries to watch the Olympics. You know, I think there's families of athletes, and maybe the athletes, families and friends of athletes come, but not that many people make sojourns across the planet to watch the Olympic Games. Like in Vancouver, it's mostly Canadians, and in London, it's mostly people from England. The World Cup is different. Like it literally is tens of thousands of people from all of the countries participating. And to me, that was the other coolest part. The souk, which is the place you would see on the studio when Lindsay was hosting or Luke was hosting in the background, was just kind of the center of the town. And you walk through that market, and it would literally be 40 different countries, everybody wearing the jerseys or whatever. And to me, that I've never had an experience like that covering a sporting event, and I don't think I ever will again. And I don't think you'll ever see that at the World Cup, because you remember most World Cups are spread out, around the country. So you have maybe 4 teams playing in one city and 4 in another city hundreds of miles away, and that's the way it'll be in 2026 with the U.S., Mexico, and Canada. To have all 32 nations based in the same small city is something I don't think we'll ever see again. So that was really cool.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. You've covered lots of Stanley Cup Finals, James, and it's obviously the scope of it. It's not even in the same, hemisphere in a lot of ways. But is there something that the World Cup does well that you think the National Hockey League could maybe steal from? Some element to it, some way they go about it, some way of presenting, promoting something. Is there something to be learned from the way the World Cup is done by the National Hockey?
That's a great question, and I don't know. I think the events are
Dryden thought of it.
I think they're so different that I'm not sure that there's anything you can copy because of the things I was just talking about. A Stanley Cup final will never have, like I said, the gathering point would be a neat thing where, in the particular city, if there was a place to go, and some cities that naturally happens, like a place like Nashville where you have the Strip and everybody just goes there the days off between the games. But not every city has that. I always think in New York when we're covering the Rangers, as great a hockey city as New York is, it's so big and so spread out that it's hard to find that, one place to hang out during the final. So I just think they're two different events. I could probably think of something marketing wise that I'm not thinking of off the top of my head right now, Rish. Mm-hmm. But FIFA's hardly perfect either in a lot of the things they do. But I will say this, like for all the controversy over Qatar, and valid, for the human rights abuses over the years there, if you can put that aside, which is a difficult thing to put aside, but I can only go on my own personal experience. They ran an incredible World Cup. Now, that's probably based on the fact that they spent $300 billion and had zero budget. And again, this will probably be the only sporting event in history where there was zero budget. So they could literally get as many workers and volunteers as they possibly needed. But I don't know that I've ever been to a bigger event that was run better. That, you get into the stadiums and to the venues and everything you needed, and the subway was incredibly efficient. And there was volunteers everywhere telling you what to do. We've all been to Olympics where you've had nightmares here and there in getting to something, or the logistical stuff that you deal with as fans or as media. This was an incredibly well-run event. But again, they spent $300 million. I mean, there's a place outside the stadium on Sunday that hosts the final, Lusail. They basically built a Vegas Strip right outside the stadium, and the sidewalks are air conditioned. there are vents in the entire sidewalks pouring. Which, I mean, how bad can that be for the planet? that you're air conditioning the air 24/7. It's insane. Like I felt like I was in like Disney. It was like a Disney, Epcot Center, Morocco, or something like that. Is what it felt like. It felt like the entire thing was a bit of a movie set. But as I said, on a covering basis, incredibly well run.
And just for my last question to you, James, if we can go on the pitch for a moment. You tell me, I'm kind of a bandwagon soccer fan, and I watched all the qualifying matches for Canada and obviously the World Cup. Mm-hmm. There was this sense after Canada's third game of, people kind of lashing out a bit on social media about ultimately Canada's performance. And I was like, really? After 36 years? But I'm not a soccer expert, so I didn't say anything because I wasn't sure what the right analysis was, to be honest. But I will say that seeing two of Canada's group teams make the semifinals, I wonder if it gives you a bit of a revisionist analysis in terms of what Canada had to put up with.
Right. Well, first of all, I'll say I don't pretend to be an expert either, Pierre. As you know, I mean, I follow international soccer very closely, and I've watched every Canadian game for probably the last 6 years. But I'm certainly not anywhere in the world of the Luke Wildmans and Kevin Kilban and Stephen Caldwell, who do this, every day of their lives. But I would say there's two parts to your question or your answer there. I think you're right. I think Canada got a really tough group, and now that the tournament's almost over, we can conclude that by the performances of, to have Morocco and Croatia go to the semis and Belgium being the second ranked team in the world, even though they weren't at their best. I think we can look back now and say that was probably the toughest group. You could argue there was the group that had Spain and Germany and Japan in there. But I would say that Canada's group was the toughest group to get a result or to get a win in, which is what Canada really wanted at this tournament. Like if you look back, most of the groups had at least one weak link that I would say Canada would have gotten a draw or a win against. And the fact that they were in this group, they probably should have got something against Belgium in retrospect, but this was probably the hardest group for them to get. That what they wanted was their first ever result at the World Cup. Having said all that, I do think that, the half an hour where Croatia completely dominated them and the half an hour where the first half hour of the game against Morocco, I do think that you take from that the Canadians there's still a big gap there between the elite teams in the world and where Canada is. And that's fine. Like I'm with you. I think there's nothing wrong with being proud that they were there and that they performed well and that two of the games were close. I think that after 36 years, I think you're fine to say that. I don't think we could look at it as critically as, you could look at Belgium's performance or something when they're a second-ranked team in the world. But I think there's still a sizable gap there, and it's going to be a real challenge to narrow that in the next 4 years before we're co-hosts in 2026.
And it's crazy. Sorry, Ryan, just a comment, not a question for you, James. But I was at one of my daughter's hockey tournaments in Montreal. When Davies scored in the opening minute or two against Croatia. Yeah. And there were about 100 hockey parents. I don't know how many of them had watched a soccer game in their lives, who literally leapt out of their seats in the middle of this arena because sort of connected to all these four pads. And it just
was the game on? So people
were the game was
watching
on.
while the game was
on. They put
on.
it on all the screens in sort of the central area in this multi-pad complex in downtown Quebec. And that moment, it just like people want this so bad, and I think in our country, right? I mean, and so I think there will be kind of a legacy impact, I think, anyway, about having gotten back to the Men's World Cup and then what comes next, hopefully.
Yeah, one thing I was disappointed. Sorry, Ryan. One thing I was disappointed at. We had cameras at watch parties across the country, and I'll be honest with you, they all kind of fizzled. People didn't show up. There weren't enough people at them, and that was the one thing.
The games are during the day.
Yeah, the timing wasn't great in Canada for sure, but you've seen the scenes from most of the other countries. At least when it got to the round of 16, the quarterfinals, the scenes in Morocco and in Argentina and so on and so forth, where there's tens of thousands of people in a square watching the game. And I wish that could have happened somewhere in Canada. Where you saw that, and maybe we're not there yet, or like you say, Pierre, maybe it's just the time of day that it was happening. But I think that's the next step, right? As a soccer nation, is you have to have everybody glued, and maybe that'll happen in 2026 when it's here.
How are we feeling about the final prognostication here, Argentina, France?
Yeah, I'm not very good at this. I think France is better for sure. So if I had to put money down, I'd put it on France, I think. But I'm like everybody else. Like Messi's just is so great, and I'd love to see him win one. And he's the greatest X factor. Like we use that term X factor how many millions of times in sports, and in a game like this where Argentina's really not that good up and down the lineup, but they have this one guy that doesn't matter how France, if he decides to have the game of his life and score twice, and they'll win the World Cup. So I think that's what makes it a fascinating matchup.
Just hope it doesn't go to penalties.
Someone's about to win their third.
Yeah, I'm with you, Pierre.
Yeah, exactly.
No penalties.
Yeah, let's have a nice clean win. All right, James.
Yeah.
Well, great job over there. Great job today on the podcast. Thanks for joining us. Sorry for the technical mess, but gotta say, buddy, you were my rock today. You were my rock.
I don't know. Like I said some disparaging things when your internet was down that you may have to rethink that afterwards. So if you edit that out, that's okay. Pleasure to be back on the Got Your Back podcast. And
Ryan,
next time you guys call me in 6 months, I'll be ready again.
It won't be a good sign, Ryan, when the invoice from Duthie doesn't come from him himself, but from his agent. So that's the only thing I'll say right now.
Yeah.
Mine's done by I do a minute thing. So you initially called me for I think it was a 20-minute roundtable and a 10-minute interview. I've been with you now for an hour and 10 minutes. So that'll be a triple invoice. Have a great day.
Yeah, that's okay. It was well worth it. Well worth it. Great job today, fellas. Thank you kindly. And thank you for your downloads and your subscriptions and sticking with us through the bumps we have the odd time here on Got Your Back. A big thanks to our sponsors as well. Cross Country Canada Supplies and Rentals, Pro Hockey Life, and of course, Liberty Smart Security. We'll be back next week, folks. Everything ironed out. And we'll talk to you then. Cheers.